polycletian male head in Oslo, thus giving a possible idea of how the otherwise less known Hermes of Polykletos could have looked. The combination of a basalt torso in Florence, belonging to a replica of the famous Doryphoros with the corresponding head from the same stone material exhibited in St. Petersburg Hermitage, and because of the unusual stone material, the affiliation of these elements is nearly without doubt. We would have absolute certitude only if the two fragments would fit together. But once again, the important neck link is missing. Thanks to the medium plaster, such missing pieces can easily be restored by a sculptor. All these unique Berger completions of precise statuary types, already spectacular and unique, had been surpassed by the Parthenon project realized by Berger and his team between 1968 and 1986. The reunification by plaster cast of all the Parthenon pediment sculptures, friezes, and metopes dispersed in several museums. In addition to the Athens Acropolis Museum, important sculptures are exhibited at the British Museum, the legendary Elgin marbles, but also the Louvre, the Museo Archeologico in Palermo, and other museums house original elements. Thanks to the financial support of the Swiss National Fund, all fragments of the friezes, the metopes, and the pediment figures could be molded in original places, in Athens, in London, Paris, Palermo, and other locations, and brought together in their cast substitutes to the Skulpturhalle, where lacunas were filled. Nowhere else can one overview the friezes, the metopes, and the pediment groups in full length and size. As a pars pro toto, I would like to present a section from the East Frieze with the famous Artemis Aphrodite group, the most beautiful part of the assembly of the Olympian gods represented seated in the middle of the East Frieze. Between the left half of plate 6, with the gods Poseidon, Apollo, and Artemis, which is housed today in the new Acropolis Museum, and the plate 7, with the so-called Philae heroes in the British Museum, there is a gap that in Basel could be executed in an almost complete manner. The plate 6 was nearly complete by end of 18th century when the artist Louis-Sébastien Fauvel made a mold after it. The cast had been expedited to the cast collection of the Paris Académie des Beaux-Arts, and this plaster, this plaster has survived until today, whereas the original marble slab broke into several parts with the consequence that the right-hand part with arrows was lost forever. Berger could make a mold after the Paris plaster and of the lost Eros figure, and could attach to the secondary plaster copy a fragment with the foot of the Artemis, which after Fauvel's casting and after the partial destruction of the slab in Athens was picked up by someone in the 19th century to arrive finally in the Museo Archeologico in Palermo. And at last, we could attach further fragments which until this moment had been stored in the depot of the old Acropolis Museum. With that success, this particularly nice piece of the gods' assembly on the Parthenon frieze could be reborn, thanks to plaster. Reconstructions are more difficult in the case of the pediment groups, as they suffered more from the destructions and weathering than the better preserved friezes. Nearly completely destroyed is the central group of the East pediment, as only some isolated fragments survived. In order to fix their former positions, Berger and the sculptor Ludwig Stocker tried to roughly reconstruct the missing figures in polystyrene imitations in exact size and faithful proportions, in which the then loose fragments could have been integrated. These complements are of great importance, particularly in the case of the central statue of Zeus in the east side pediment, who was seated in the middle axis of the pediment, seated and not standing, as I would like to emphasize. A thigh fragment of an enthroned figure can be attributed only to a central figure, as its proportions differ slightly from all other fragments in size. Such divergence in size, even if to a small degree, can be recognized only when the fragments are examined in their life size. Movable casts can respect the size and plasticity of the originals in an exact manner. In a two-dimensional reconstruction drawing, such divergences can easily be overlooked or disregarded. Without taking into account the real space and size conditions, so many things can be tinkered or suppressed. Unfortunately, it seems that is why in all recent reconstruction propositions of the Parthenon pediments, the Zeus is always shown standing, and consequently the thigh fragment is attributed to one of the seated figures in the edges of the pediment. The one-to-one situation in Basel reconstruction excludes such cheatings. The Zeus must have been seated and not standing. In the former display of the Skulpturhalle reconstructions, the reconstructions of the pediments and the alignment of the friezes and metopes took up nearly the entire main hall. The casts of all metopes and frieze slabs were mounted on freestanding display supports placed prominently in the middle of the exhibition place. To offer a better understanding of the ancient cohesion between architecture and its sculpture decor, an architectural model of the reconstructed temple in scale 1:20 was and still is integrated to the exhibition. Today, the Parthenon exhibition is arranged in a condensed manner due to lack of space. On the other hand, the newly painted walls, the blue tympanum background, as well as the colored imitations of the triglyphs indicate indirectly and partially the original polychromy appearance of the temple. Thanks to all these research and reconstruction projects and the accelerated acquisitions, the Skulpturhalle benefited under the directorship of Ernst Berger from 1963 to 1993, not only from unique achievements, but also the triplication of its objects. Today, the Skulpturhalle proposes more than 2,200 casts and several architectural models. It is true, though, that today scientific research does not have the high priority it had 13 years ago. It is nowadays generally expected for a modern museum to attract a wider public and not only a small, exclusive bunch of experts. But this does not mean that there would not be any research work done at all. It is the attempts and the questions towards history and cultural history that have changed. In recent exhibitions, the Skulpturhalle pursued the influences of antiquity on modern life and culture, and thus elaborated new research topics and themes. Thus, a series of successful shows examined the afterlife of ancient art, mythology, and history in popular media, such as in publicity, comics, or in film. Parallel to such exhibitions, the Skulpturhalle also presented works and installations of contemporary artists to underline the perpetual influence and inspiration of antique art. Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, we can sum up by saying that the Skulpturhalle is, despite its unique parts, a typical collection of plaster casts after antique sculptures. It ran through all the ups and downs of its inception, appreciation, and disapprobation, which marked the evolution of all other cast museums in the world. The evolution from an ideal academic museum to a university study collection, and finally to a multifunctional museum corresponding to the expectations of a modern and a wider public. Thank you very much for your attention.